Hello everyone, it's me Narendra from AlmaBetter team, and I'm here to present you our masterclass on how to build a career as a software developer. Before we dive into this interesting masterclass, let me tell you a bit about AlmaBetter. We are a student-first edtech platform, and we work hard towards a better tomorrow for our students. In today's masterclass, you will learn about in-depth understanding of the software development industry, essential skills and qualifications for a successful software development career, how to create an impressive resume and optimize your online presence, how to develop effective networking strategies within the software development community, how to showcase your technical expertise and problem solving skills in job interviews, gain insights on real world examples and successful software development careers, navigate through the job search process and how to stand out among other candidates. So now I would like to introduce you to your instructor for today's masterclass, Neeraj Sharma. He is a software engineer at Microsoft with a decade of experience in software industry. I will now hand over the session to Neeraj. I hope you all have wonderful learning experience. Over to you, Neeraj.
Thanks, Narendra. I'll share my screen. Okay. I hope you can see my screen.
Yes, yes.
Perfect. And how about the audio? Is it fine?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Just a second. Fine. Perfect. Thank you. Okay, so essentially, what are we planning to do today? So we are going to be giving a software development overview, what exactly it is, what all stuff it includes, right? We'll be talking about what are the key skills we need as a software developer, right? And what sort of a background one should have in order to, excel into the software development. We'll also be talking about the how we basically go about the job search and what are the career advancement we could have in the software development. So that's essentially the idea for today's session. Okay, so before going into the software development, let me tell you about myself. I'm a software developer and I'm having a close to 8+ year of experience, right? And I started my career actually from a product-based company. Then I moved to a service-based company. Then I moved to a captive company. Then I moved to a product-based companies. So in short, you could say that I kind of had worked in most of the companies which we have in the industry, right? So you could say ki haan, ghat ghat ka pani piya hua hai, right? So that's the thing about me. Okay, let's get into the software development, right? What it is and what all stuff it has, right? Let's try to understand that. So first thing first, when we talk about software development, essentially what we are trying to do, we are trying to develop a software, right? And what is a software? Software essentially is a program which we have developed in order to solve a particular problem, right? Now, when we work on a software, the main thing which comes up is the requirement, right? So it's not that you build a software out of a blue, right? You develop a software to solve certain problem, right? And that problem has to come from somewhere, right? And that is where we talk about this thing called SDLC, right? Which is a software development lifecycle, where we have a certain problem with us, okay? And then we are developing a software towards it. So essentially, whenever we are developing a software, we go through a particular cycle to develop that software so that it is a robust software, correct? That's the main intention around here, right? The main thing actually starts from the planning phase. So there are certain phases, right? So the first phase is actually planning. So the idea is when you are saying that you would like to develop a software, so you are developing a software for somebody. So when you work in a corporate environment, when you work in an enterprise application, right? The idea is somebody need that sort of a system for themselves, right? And we have to develop it as a software developer. We have to develop it. But the first thing is we need to have a requirement for it, right? So we should be having a reason to develop something, and that is where the planning comes into the picture. So usually we call it as a business, that we have some sort of a business. When we say business, is essentially the people who really will be using that particular product, the one you are building, right? It could be a business. So for example, if you are working for a bank, right? So for example, you're working for Morgan Stanley. So Morgan Stanley will have their employees, right? And those employees will be using certain software in order to do, in order to do their day-to-day work. Now, to develop that software, you have to come up with certain features and all that stuff, right? And that is where the people who are taking care of the business will be deciding what sort of a feature they would like to have, right, in the software. And that is where a couple of other people come into the picture, like a business analyst you have, right? And then you have your product manager, all that stuff are there. What they would be doing, they will be coming up with a plan, like, okay, these are the things which we want to have. Essentially, we could say they will be coming up with the requirements, right? They'll be coming up with the requirements. Once you have the requirements, what you do, you basically analyze those requirements. Okay, so till here we are analyzing, okay, what are the feasibility around those requirements which we have got, right? Once we have analyzed the requirement and we are sure, okay, this is something we would like to go with, and this is something we would like to develop, from here onwards, the main work of your developer starts, right? So you essentially get into designing the software. So when you design, there are multiple ways a problem can be solved. There are multiple ways you could solve one feature. You could bring up that feature in a multiple ways. So you design for it, right? You decide what all things you would be using there. For example, what kind of technologies you are planning to use there, right? And what sort of a flow of that particular application will be, how the data flow will be, like all that stuff you will be deciding in the design phase. Once that design has been confirmed, that you are sure, okay, that is what I'm going to be having. So what you do, you move to the implementation phase. Implementation is essentially what? That you are trying to code that application, right? So you get into the implementation. This is where you are actually writing the code, right? And once you have done that, you move to the testing and integration phase. So you being a developer, you have developed a software, a program. Now you want to make sure that this program actually does what it is supposed to be doing, right? So you want to make sure there are no problems or no bugs in this particular software. That is where the testing and integration comes into the picture. Because many times what happens, the program or the service which you are creating will be interacting with other services as well. Consider Amazon or Flipkart or any of the e-commerce sites. So they do have the main thing, which is, selling the product. But when it comes to the payment, what they do, they basically interact with another system, right? For example, if you are making a payment through PayPal, HDFC Bank, or any other things. So what essentially you do, you are making a payment through a third-party gateway, right? So what is exactly happening? You are actually interacting with another piece of software, right? So that is where the integration also comes into the picture, that you make sure that you are having a correct integration in place. That means your software is able to, the program which you have developed is able to interact to the other system the way you intended, right? That is the intention here. So once you clear that thing also, that you are sure, okay, by this point, so the software which you have developed is working as expected and everything is going flawless. That's where the next step comes in, which is the maintenance. Okay, so maintenance essentially means that you have a product which is working fine, but what happens in its software development or in general as well, things evolve over the time, isn't it? So once things are evolving, you might add new features, okay? Or maybe you remove the existing feature, modify certain things in that. And that is where the maintenance comes into the picture, okay? So essentially you could say that you are providing the support, you're providing the support for the application, the one you have got, okay? So you're providing the support for it. That is what essentially is happening in your maintenance phase, okay? I hope we are good till here. Can we see some question and answer sections? Okay, fine. Let's move to the next one. Fine. The main thing comes up now. What is the importance, like what exactly the importance we have for a software development in the tech industry? So if you see, right, the actual ball, who is rolling the actual ball in the ground? It's a software developer, right? So once you have the requirement in place and everything has been decided that something has to be built on, who is actually doing the development. It's a software developer, right? So I could say it's the most essential part of the engine if I talk about the entire software development life cycle, because they are the one who are actually developing a software where they are making sure the software is scalable, it has a performance, right? It has the necessary security which we need, it has the privacy and everything, right? So that is where the main job of software developer comes into the picture, and which is quite crucial in terms of the overall development cycle of a software, right? Okay, let's get into the common development roles we have in the software development. Because see, if you are planning to get into software development, you would like to know, what sort of things or what sort of career paths you could probably have, right? What kind of technologies are there? What all things you need to learn for what sort of a role? Okay, so for example, you could and these things. Okay, so one more thing I would like to tell, these roles may overlap. Okay, it's not that every company will be having essentially the same roles. Okay, they may, it's more of a generic idea, right? But from a company to company, they do change a bit. Okay, so the first thing is like a soft you could have a very generic stuff, which is a software development engineer, which is SDE, which is essentially taking care of designing and implementing a software solution. And within that, you could probably have something like a front end developer. Okay, so a front end developer is somebody who is taking care of the front end stuff. We will talk about what exactly front end developer is in just a few minutes. Probably you could go for a back end developer. Okay, and we also have something called a full stack developer. A full stack developer is somebody who is taking care of both the front. So he's a front end developer, he knows about front end, and he do know about the back end as well. Then comes the mobile app developer. So you already know mobile application being developed, right? The one we are using from day to day. So these are also being developed. Like for example, for Android, you have a different tech stack which you use, and for iOS, you might have a different one, right? Then we have something called a DevOps engineer. A DevOps engineer essentially is taking care of the development process towards the infrastructure. Okay, how to move a certain thing from. So once you have developed a software, how that software should get published or get deployed to the servers and other stuff. We will talk about how this entire thing works. A software architect, somebody who is essentially taking care of the design, like what sort of technologies and how the entire flow of the application would be, right? And that is what we even discussed in the SDLC, right? So in the SDLC also, during the design phase, we will be having an architect who will be taking care of the design. He'll be coming up with a design which has to be implemented, right? So that is something a software architect does. Then the QA engineer. A QA engineer is a quality assurance engineer, right? So what they are essentially doing, they are testing the quality of the software. When we talk about the quality of software, we say whether the software is working with the so considering if we have certain functionality in our software, are we delivering all those functionality properly or not? Okay, are there any edge cases? For example, there could be certain edge cases where your application may break, okay, or may not perform the way it has to. So those are the things which a quality engineer has to make sure that are not happening. Okay, that's the main intention about the quality engineer. Fine. Okay, meanwhile, I'll just check the chat and the question just in case if you guys have anything. Okay, perfect. Okay, somebody has asked what is what is the earliest problem faced by a developer? Okay, so once you are a developer, the main thing which you would be doing on a day-to-day basis is developing code, right? So first is you should be knowing the requirement, right? And understanding the system which you are developing. That's the main first problem which you essentially get into. So you try to understand what the system is. For example, if you get into a company which is an insurance, okay, so it's an insurance provider. The first thing which you I'm already considering that you already know about the technologies and everything. After that, I'm saying if you get into a company, the first thing which you would like to know is how that particular domain works, right? How that particular business works. So once you understand that business, then only you'll be able to put a better judgment towards your design, your code and everything, right? That's the main thing. Okay, let's come back to the key skills towards the software development and the possibilities of the career which we have in the software development. The first thing first is front-end developer. So now, who exactly is a front-end developer? So a front-end developer is somebody who is taking care of the front end of the application. It is that simple. Okay. but it is not that simple. So the thing is, you have a website, right? That could be one front end you could consider. So consider you are using Facebook, you are using Instagram, you're using a lot of other websites. So these are the websites which are being developed by somebody, right? Now, these front ends which you are using, which the customer or a user is interacting, that is something being developed by a front end developer. A front end developer is the one who is actually taking care of creating this application, making sure it has the performance, it is not having any sort of issues, like that sort of a thing is a front end developer is taking care of. So usually when we talk about the software, right, or in terms of the web, so to say, the internet, so we can divide it in two phases, right? So we can have something called a client, right? Now this client could be like it could be your web browser, it could be mobile application, like that. And then we have something called a server. Okay, so what a server? A server is essentially it's basically just a computer which is just sitting somewhere in the world, right, which you interact with. So by using internet, what you do, you basically request something from the server and the server gives you the data, right? So for example, whenever you say google.com, so what essentially you're doing from your client, you're making a request. Okay, there is a DNS also which comes into the picture, because we don't really know about so basically we don't have something like a google.com, we essentially have an IP for it, right? So everything in the internet is actually being identified by the IP. So you first make a call to a DNS server, get the IP for that google.com. IP is basically something which is defining where this exact server is. So you need an IP address, you need an address of something in order to go and contact them, right? That is in general also we do. So if you want to go somewhere, you need to know the address. The same thing happens even in the internet. So you get the address of it, and after that a client makes a request to that server, right? And this request is actually an HTTP request. You must be seeing in a lot of your URLs, or all of your URLs, it's always have an HTTP starting with an HTTP or HTTPS, right? So you make a request to the server, and then server responds you with respond with some sort of a response, right? And you take that response and then show it to the client. So what is happening? For example, when you say google.com, so what happened? You made a request to that server. A server gave you a page, an HTML page, right? The client got it, that response, client being a browser in this case. Your browser knows how to display that website, right? It got an HTML page, it knows how to display that, and that is where you are seeing the entire thing. But who developed that HTML page, right? And who did all that coding for that HTML page? A front-end developer actually did that. The code which is being saved at the server is actually being developed by a front-end developer. Okay, so that's essentially the role of a front-end developer. Now, in order to get into the front-end development, you need to know certain technologies which you could use. Okay, so some of them are the main crucial one, or the very basic ones are HTML. So you need to know HTML. HTML is something which your browser understands, right? Then you have something called a CSS. So you could create an HTML, you could create a page, but when it comes to styling that page, giving say sort of a color, giving animations and all that sort of things which you see, right? For example, when you have for example, for example, you have like a responsive design. If you know, you have a website, for example, consider you have your facebook.com. Okay, let's take Facebook as an example. So when you open a Facebook on your laptop, it looks a little different. Okay, the moment you shift to say a iPad or a tablet or something, it looks a little different, right? The positions of the things changes, right? When you open it in the mobile, it changes, right? Why it is changing? Because it is adapting to the screen which you are using, right? That is what the responsive design is. And you can achieve the responsive design from CSS. Okay, so the idea is, irrespective of the application you are using, when I say application, is like it could be a mobile application, it could be a web browser, it could be an application which is running on a tablet or somewhere else. You are able to open the website and able to provide the best possible interaction to the customer or to the user, right? For example, if you are opening a very big website in a very small mobile, obviously it will be a bit difficult for somebody to go over to the website, right? To move through the website. So what you would like to do, you would like to arrange the content of a website such a way that we could show all the important content within a small screen, right? So that is the thing. So you need to know an HTML. So basically, if you're planning to get into the front-end development, you need to know HTML. Then you have to get into the CSS, right? I have told you what CSS is going to be doing for you. And then comes the JavaScript. So this is like super important, right? JavaScript essentially provides the dynamic behavior to your web applications. So for example, if you see, let's take an example of Instagram. So you have just posted an pic, and then you're just waiting for some comments to flow. Now, what do? You don't really need to refresh your application. You just stay on that application, and what happens? If somebody has commented or liked or has interacted with your post, you immediately see that. Why? Because of the JavaScript. Because JavaScript is providing that dynamic behavior to you, that you don't really need to refresh the application. You don't really need to do anything. Behind the scenes, JavaScript is making a call to the server, getting the latest comment, getting the latest stats on your profile, and providing that information. And that is where the JavaScript comes into the picture. Okay, so this is super important when we talk about JavaScript. And the other thing which you need to know when you are planning to use JavaScript, it is not just using the JavaScript. You with JavaScript, a lot of other problem you may bring into your application. One of them is basically the security. So whenever you are using your JavaScript, you have to be very cautious around this security. There are multiple sort of attacks which could be performed by using JavaScript. Okay, so being a front-end developer, you should also be knowing the vulnerable side of these technologies, right? What all things you should not be using, or what sort of a security measure you should be having in your application, right? That's the main thing. Okay, one more thing. See, we are telling about each and every developer role. Why? Because when you are starting your career, or at least when you're thinking that you would like to get into software development, you would like to know what all things are possible, right? For example, there could be somebody who might be more interested toward developing these sort of things, right? Developing a front end. Then there could be somebody who may be interested in a mobile application, developing a mobile application. So knowing what kind of possibilities are there, right? That is the main intention here. And what sort of a technical stack you probably will need to have, right? That's the main intention of this entire session. Okay, so that's about the front-end development. I hope it's clear. Anyone has any questions on it? Let me just see some. Okay, I think we are good. Fine. Okay, let's talk about the key technologies which we need to know in order to basically have the best possible career in the front-end development, right? The first thing which I told you is HTML. Okay, so HTML, it's a very basic. It is not that hard. It is super simple. Okay, and I can, within a day, within an hour or two, you can start with HTML. Okay, you just see how it works. You basically have a language where you basically use some sort of a tags. You define, for example, if you need a button, you tell you need a button. You tell where exactly you need that button. All that sort of thing you define in HTML. And this is super simple. It's not so much of a brainer. You can easily get into it. CSS takes a little bit of time, because the very basic CSS is simple. Okay, so what you do, you basically providing a background color, you are changing the font, you are increasing the size of a button, you are decreasing the size, like those sort of a thing. When you're doing it, super simple. But when it comes to the responsive design, that is where it becomes a little tricky. And that is where the thing which we say a media query comes into the picture, which you need to learn how to use media query in CSS and all that stuff, which essentially let you change the design of your application or your software based on the screen you are using. For example, if I'm using right now a MacBook, which is having a 13.1 inch, how it should look. If I'm going to a bigger screen, a 15-inch laptop, how it should behave. And if I'm coming to a mobile application, how it should behave. So that is all the media query is taking care for you. Then in the entire stuff, the super important stuff is actually the JavaScript, because JavaScript is the one which is actually doing a lot of heavy lifting for you. Okay, and nowadays you cannot imagine the web without JavaScript, because there is so much JavaScript all around you. Maybe you can do this one day. Just open any of the website which you use on day-to-day basis, and just disable JavaScript. So what you could do, you can open your browser. There is an option to disable JavaScript. So what will happen? It will not run JavaScript on the browser. And the moment you will do that, you will see your entire application is like, it's super ugly. It's not looking the way you want it to be. It's not behaving the way you want it to be. So that's the thing. So JavaScript is super important, and providing the dynamic behavior to your application. And when we talk about JavaScript, we also need to know certain programming ways, right? For example, you need to know about object-oriented programming, OOPS, right? And then we also have something called functional programming. So in JavaScript, we do use a functional programming a lot. Okay, so you should be knowing how to go about object-oriented programming and the functional programming. I will cover a little bit about object-oriented programming in the backend, because object-oriented programming actually came up from the backend, and then even JavaScript adopted it, right? And in some ways, I can say JavaScript is not really an object-oriented programming. It is an object-aware programming. It knows about the object. It is object-aware rather than object-oriented. Okay, so we'll come into the object-oriented, what exactly it is. But yeah, so you need to know these concepts. You have to know about object-oriented programming. You need to know about functional programming. Okay, after this, once you have your basics sorted, so you know about HTML, you know about CSS, and you know about JavaScript. That is where the frameworks come into the picture. Okay, so you have a multiple frameworks to quickly develop your application. Okay, when I say quickly develop your application, if you start with vanilla HTML, CSS, and JavaScript, it might take a good amount of time to build an application like Instagram, Facebook, and all this stuff, because you would be writing a lot of code by yourself. But the problem, one thing which you need to understand, the problem which you are trying to solve, it's not just you are solving that problem. There are a lot of other people who might have faced the same problem, and they probably have find a better solution for it, right? And that is where these frameworks comes into the picture. So there are very smart people who have developed frameworks for you, the libraries for you. What you could do, you could just simply use it and leverage on top of it, right? That is the main intention around here. So some of the very popular frameworks which you could go for when we talk about the front-end development is Angular. Okay, you have React.js. You can go for Vue.js, right? These are some of the top ones which you could go for. Now, people ask which one is better. Okay, so it depends. So it depends on like multiple factors. So for example, let's talk about Angular versus React. I will not take Vue.js in the consideration for now, but let's talk about Angular versus your React.js. Now, when people ask me which one is better or which one do I prefer, okay, so I like Angular better. Okay, so I like Angular better doesn't mean that Angular is actually better. Okay, I like Angular better because there are certain reasons for it. Why? Because I actually started my career as a backend developer. Okay, and then I moved to the full stack development, and that is where the first thing which I learned was the Angular framework. Okay, so because this was the first thing which I learned, and there we use TypeScript. Here we use use a superset of JavaScript. So we have JavaScript, and we have basically enhanced it, and we came up with TypeScript. Okay, so that's something we use in Angular. In React.js, we simply use JavaScript. We can also use TypeScript also, but it is not necessary to do that. In case of Angular, we have to use TypeScript. So for me, Angular makes more sense because TypeScript a little more closer to the kind of languages I have used in backend, right? So Angular made more sense. It is a complete framework, has everything in it. So I liked Angular better. But for somebody else who is starting early or maybe just know about JavaScript, it makes a lot of sense to go toward React.js, because then you are just learning JavaScript and you are able to work in a framework like React.js or a library like React.js. So that's more of a personal choice, I would say. You cannot really say Angular is better, React is better. Job-wise, you do have almost equal set of jobs around both these things. I'd say React.js has a little more, because with React.js, you get into the MERN stack. We will talk about what exactly MERN stack is. But there is a little bit of an edge in the React.js. I do see a little more openings of React.js compared to Angular. But again, it is like very like fraction of difference. Okay, so it's not really big of a difference. So you can always you can decide between Angular and React. It's not that big of a deal. And this is towards the development of like the technologies which you need while developing a software, right? And then comes something called a version control system. Okay, now version control system is super important, because when you are developing a software, you will be keep on making changes to it, right? And you would like to know what all changes has been done by when, like when, who did what changes, when did we push, when did we make a code commit. When we say code commit, essentially means that you made a changes and you are saying, okay, these are the finalized changes, like that. So you need to make sure that you are maintaining those changes at some place, and that is where the version control system comes into the picture. Okay, and that is where we talk about Git. So you already know, I think most of you should already be knowing about Git. So Git is essentially a version control system which keep tracks of the file which you have. Consider you started with a one file. Okay, so you created a project, started with one HTML file. Okay, what you did, once you are done with this file, you basically commit this. Okay, and it or commit, or like I'll also say push, you push these changes to the version control system, and now what is happening, version control system is keeping a track of this HTML file. Now tomorrow if you come up and make a change to this HTML file, okay, in your system you will be having a new version of that HTML file. What you will be doing, you will be pushing this change back to the version control. Now version control will keep both these file itself. So at any point of time you may want to know, okay, what did I do before this, like what was the initial change in this particular file. So you can get all that information from a version control system. And version control system is also super important because you are working, so when you work for an enterprise, right, when you work for a corporate, it's not just you who's working, right? If it would be just you, probably you'll be able to manage by yourself. Okay, there is a multiple teams who are interacting, right? It's not a small software you're working on, it's a big one. A lot of people are working, and everyone will be making changes to the same code base. When I say code base, is essentially where you have kept all your code. So everyone is making changes to that code base, right? And they have the access to make changes to it. Now in that case, managing that stuff by yourself becomes difficult. Okay, so you need a tool to take care of all that stuff, and that is where the Git is coming into the picture. I mean, you could just consider a scenario like this. Say suppose if you are working in a normal team, right, and say you decided, okay, you have been working in that company for say 4-5 years like that, and after that you think, okay, now is the time that I should move, or maybe say you had a conflict with your manager, something happened. Okay, now something happened, you would like to leave. Now what you did, you are like, okay, now I'm leaving. What I'm going to be doing, I'll be deleting all my code. Okay, because I'm leaving, I want to make sure that this company will not be able to use my code, or something like that. Some sort of a bad thing came into your mind and you're just trying to do that. So you delete the entire code and everything. Okay, so let's take this one, like somebody like a Pooja you have in your team, and what she did it by mistake. She can always say that, right, that I did it by mistake. So in that case, what a manager has to do now, manager kya kare, job chhod de, right? He cannot really do that, right? Because if somebody like Pooja or somebody else, like I'm not generalize it, I'm not saying like Pooja, like every Pooja is doing this thing, but you get the idea that if somebody is coming and making some sort of a wrong changes in your application, right, you would like to have a way to prevent that, right? And all those features are being provided by your Git. Git is making sure that if at all any changes are being made, you have the authority over those changes. Only then you can make those changes. If at all, even if you have made the changes and those changes are wrong, what you do, you can revert the changes. You can move back to a previous state. Okay, all that sort of things you could do in your Git. Now people often get confused with Git and GitHub, right? Even you must have heard about Git, and then you must have heard about GitHub, right? These are two separate things actually. How? Let me just take one example. So let's say UPI, right? You know about UPI, through which you do the payment and everything. Now UPI is actually a technology, correct? UPI is a technology, and by using that UPI technology, we have these other platforms like Google Pay is there, right? We have Paytm, we have Phone Pay. All these softwares or these applications are essentially what? They are using UPI, which is an underlying technology, in order to serve their customers. Okay, the same thing happens in case of Git as well. So in case of Git, what happens is you have Git, which is the underlying technology, and then you have something like GitHub, which is using your Git technology. You have Bitbucket, right? You can have something like Azure DevOps, which use that. Okay, you can have something like AWS code commit, right? All of these are essentially using the same Git. So what you need to learn, you just need to learn the Git, how the Git works, how the version control works in the Git, what all commands do you use, how do you push the changes, how do you pull the changes, how you take the changes from the server, how do you make the changes to the server. All that information you need to learn. Once you know that, it does not matter which platform you're using. You could be using GitHub, it's going to be same. If you're using Bitbucket, it's going to be same. If you're using Azure DevOps, it's going to be same. If you're using AWS code commit, it's going to be same. Okay, so what you need to learn is just the Git, and you don't really need to worry about the other platform. GitHub because it is publicly available, you can start with GitHub, right? And most of the things which you will be doing with the GitHub can equally be applied to any of the other version control system which you might encounter in your career while working your first company or any other new companies. Okay, fine. Let's see. Okay, so we are good till here. So we know about the core stack of the software front-end development, right? And we also know about the version control system. We also know about what all front-end we could go for, right? Front-end framework we could go for. After that, another tools which comes into the picture are the build tools which you essentially use while developing your application. Again, these tools are providing you sort of what to say, it's basically allowing you to perform better, right? It is making sure that they are taking care of most of the heavy lifting which otherwise has to be done by you. One of the very popular tool which we have it nowadays is Webpack, right? A Webpack is sort of a bundler, and it does multiple things. Okay, so for example, if you created an application like Angular or React, they internally uses Webpack. So even though sometimes you do not really see that Webpack is being used, the framework itself internally is using Webpack. So then the question must be like, okay, if the framework is internally using Webpack and we don't really need to know about it, then why we have put it here? Like, why have we mentioned that thing here? Because many times what happens, the default configuration which you get out of a framework is not sufficient for you, right? You might have some sort of a specialized requirement around certain things. Okay, in that case, what you need to do, you have to make changes to the Webpack sort of a configuration which you have got, right? In order to do that, you should be having the understanding around these tools. Okay, because once you know the Webpack tool, you could make the changes. Because you need to understand this, when React.js or Angular.js is giving you a default template. So whenever you use Angular or React, just if nobody has done this before, so whenever you use Angular or React.js or any sort of other framework, they can give you a sample application and you can build on top of it, right? A sample application will contain most of the stuff, and then you can just edit on top of it and make the changes according to your requirement and your features. Now, when we talk about the sample application, it is very generic, right? A generic application, so to say, that they created application which will work for most of the people. But your use case might be more specialized. Your use case could be a lot more different than a general application. In that case, what you need to do, you need to take that configuration and you might have to change that configuration according to your need, right? So you can always start with a sample or a boilerplate code which comes up, and then can build on top of it. And that is where you could change the Webpack configuration and all that stuff you could do. Cool. I think we are good with this one. Anyone has any question related to the the front-end development? Okay, fine. Somebody asked about what is what. So WordPress, essentially, see, you have a platform being available through which you could create the websites easily. You are not really coding and doing all that stuff, right? As a consider this entire stuff. So for a developer, you can always develop a website by yourself. It is WordPress is sort of a content system. You could just go and create the website out of it. But then again, because you're using something and you are not really developing it, so there are certain limitations to it, like what all you could achieve from a WordPress site. However, when you are coming into the front-end development, the sky is yours. Like, you could decide what sort of application you would like to create, what sort of a feature you would like to give, all that sort of a thing you could do it. And that is what you must have seen, right? There are when you see very small applications, like people create blogs and all that stuff, they could go by the WordPress. They could create a small application and just work with it. But when it comes to a gigantic application which actually serving a lot of people, those are not really developed by or being sponsored by your WordPress. So that is where the actual development has to be done, and that is where the front end development comes into the picture. Okay. Let's talk about another thing, another area where we could explore, which is called backend developer. I actually, if I talk about my career, I started with a business analyst. So I worked in a company and started my career as a business analyst. Worked there for almost few months. Didn't really like the work. I felt, okay, this is not something I want to do. So I moved to development, and the first thing which I did was the backend developer. So I started my career in a way, the actual career I started as a backend developer, and then I moved to the front end development and the full stack development. So backend development is something, if I have to rate myself, so I'll say, okay, I'm better backend developer compared to a front end developer. Okay, so yeah, that's about the backend development. So as what exactly the backend development is. So you got your client, which I had told you earlier. So you have your client making a request to the server, right, in order to get the data. Now there has to be, so we know the website, we can consider our website as being one program which is running on the client on the browser. Okay, we were able to solve this thing by the front end development. We were able to develop this entire thing by the front end developer, sorry, by the front end development, all good. Now there has to be one another piece of program which should be sitting here, which is actually serving the request, right? So a client is making a request to the server and you're getting the data back, correct? So that's where the server comes into the picture. And in order to develop this piece of code, you actually use certain technologies which are being provided in your backend development. So essentially, when you're developing these part of the software, that is what your backend development is. In backend development, what you mostly do nowadays is, like, say, consider you can develop APIs. So you must have heard about APIs, right? Application Programming Interface. What is that? That's basically sort of a contract which you are exposing to somebody, saying, okay, if you ask me this, I will give you this data, right? For example, if you say, I would like to know about a student. So your API is saying, if you ask me about a student, I will give you this details of the student. If you ask me about a specific student, I will give you the data of a specific student, right? So that is the contract which your API is giving. APIs, some people call it as services also, right? So you have services, APIs. A lot of other thing also happens in the backend development, right? So in backend development, you may create services which are for external users, for example, which could be called by the internet, like APIs. Usually that's the one which we have. Then you can also have some other sort of services, which is basically taking care of your the work which is happening in server. For example, maybe you could create a service which runs periodically, okay? And what it does, it might be, say, monitoring a particular folder. So whenever a file is coming into that folder, it processes it, right? Like those kind of thing can also be done. So these services are not really interacting with the internet, so to say, but doing the other part of the things in the backend development. Okay, for example, let's consider this situation. Like, we used to have this sort of a scenario in one of the company. So we were supporting some lenders. When I say lenders, like your banks, right? Say HDFC Bank or like that. So what used to happen every every other day, we used to get a file from the vendor. So a file will be given to us. We will be placing that particular file into a certain folder. Okay, this file will contain the details of the customer, or their mortgages, how much, like loans. Essentially, when we say when somebody take a home loan, that essentially is a mortgage. Okay, so their mortgage and everything. And we have this sort of a service running on the servers. What it used to do, it used to monitor this folder. And the moment it used to see, oh, there is a file, it used to take that file, process that file, take the data from it, process it, do what it has to do, right? All that sort of thing it used to do. So those things also comes into a backend development. It is not just the APIs which we develop in the backend, right? So that's the idea behind your backend development. And if somebody asks me, because this is also sort of a debate, which one is tough, or which one is which one requires more sort of a skills, for backend development or the front end development, I might be biased here. I feel backend developer requires a little more effort compared to front end development. But again, I might be wrong. Okay, this is because I have a bias, because I have started with the backend. It's a similar bias which I have with the Angular. I like Angular better because I started with Angular, right? That sort of a thing. But again, they both the things go in hand. Okay, it's not that because you are more concerned about the salaries, it's pretty much similar. There is not so much of a huge difference. Okay, fine. So once you decided that you would like to take care of the backend work, so what you would be need to know, right? So that's where the concept of your software development, or in general, the computer comes around, right? For example, you should be knowing a little bit about your operating system, how the operating system works, because your program is actually running on the program, on the operating system which you have running, right? In case of front-end development, it is actually running on the web browser. Correct. Web browser is also running on the operating system, but the people who created the Chrome application, they are the backend developer. They have to be they needs to be worried about it. You don't need to worry about it. You just need to be worried about it, how it should work in the browser. But in case of backend development, you need, because your program is now directly running on the operating system, so you should be knowing about some of the operating system concepts, right? What is a process? What is a thread? And how this memory and all those things work, right? That sort of information you should be getting. That's one thing. You should be knowing a little bit of about the networking as well. Okay. See, you can always start with the very basics towards the operating system and the networking, and then you can build on top of it. As you work, you keep on gaining a lot more knowledge on these stuff. So these are like general stuff. You need to know operating system, networking. You also need to know something about databases. Okay. We'll talk about databases in some time. I'll come to this one because this is also very important. Then comes the technology part of it, right? So there are certain technologies which you could use in order to develop that program, the server program which I talked about. So for that, you could use Node.js. Now, Node.js is your framework. Okay. Node.js is not a language. So Node.js is using JavaScript. So you can write program in JavaScript. Okay. And then Node.js knows how to run that program. Okay. And how to use that program and how that program should be interacting with your operating system. For example, you could create a Node program to read a file from your operating system. For example, you have a file in a folder. You would like to read that. You would like to see the content of it. Okay. You want to create a program for it, or maybe you would like to create a program to write the data to the file. So that is where Node.js is coming to the picture. You are writing the code in JavaScript. Node.js is running that code. Node.js is making sure how to interact with the operating system. It is doing all the heavy lifting for you. So that is where you could go for Node.js. So if you already know JavaScript, or if you are planning to first get into a little bit of front-end development and then get into a back-end development, you can always use Node.js to know how this entire thing works. And then we also have something called Express.js. Okay, so Express.js is sort of a module which we use in our Node.js. So you're still in Node.js and you're also using Express.js. Now your Express.js provide you capabilities in terms of creating APIs. And we could also call it as REST APIs. So REST is called as representational state transfer. It is sort of an architectural principles. Okay, so what REST says, that if you are planning to create an API, it has to be created in this certain way. Okay, so those principles are being defined in the REST. And when you adhere to those principles, when you create an application based on those principles, your API actually becomes a RESTful API. Okay, this is some little big topic. Maybe someday we'll cover this thing. Okay, now you can, so what I said, you could go with the JavaScript, and you could also go with other technologies. For example, ASP.NET, right? ASP.NET Core, you have .NET Core to create the backend code. You need to know Java. So when I talk about ASP.NET Core, it's a framework. The language, same to Node.js, right? When I said Node.js, use a JavaScript. You use JavaScript and develop an application. ASP.NET Core, you will be creating an application in C#. Okay, C# is what? It's just a language which you need to use in order to create all that stuff. And then you have something called Spring Boot. You could use something like a Spring Boot. Again, it's a framework. What is the language it is using? It is using Java, right? So you need to learn Java or any object-oriented programming language, so to say, right? If you're planning to get into the backend development, you need to know one of the object-oriented programming language, which will help you in creating all that stuff. So, okay. Now, when we come to this, which is object-oriented programming, now what exactly is this? Because this is super important. Because sometimes people say, "Bhai, हाँ, ये object किस दर्द की दवा है?" ये किसी दर्द की दवा नहीं है, ये सबसे बड़ा दर्द है actually. So whatever you do in your software development, you will be dealing with objects every day, every minute, every hour. Okay, that's what you would be doing with the objects. So let's try to understand the OOPS a little bit. Okay, so OOPS says that we will be developing our code in terms of objects. Okay, we'll be seeing things in terms of object. How? A super simple example, consider a human, right? I could just say human, or I could say like rather I could say like a person. Okay, so I could say there is something called a person, and then I look for a object of it in the real world. Okay, so I'm developing some application for a person being generalized term, right? And then I look for the object for it. An object for it could be like me. Neeraj is an object, which is a person. A person, Neeraj is also a person. That's why Neeraj is an object of that thing. Or say anybody else, like you yourself an object of a person, right? So that's the idea of an object. You take things object wise. Consider this thing, right? This is also an object for me. And when you talk about object, what do you have? You have certain characteristics of it, right? You have certain attributes associated with an object. Same thing. Let's consider a person, right? If I say person is an object, it will have certain attributes, right? For example, he'll have hair, or he'll have eyes, right? He'll have mouth, right? He'll have a skin color, all those things it will have. Those are what? Those are the attributes which is defining a person. And then there are certain things which we call as behavior. There are certain behavior also which are associated with an object. What are the behaviors? For example, walk. A person can walk. That's a behavior. He's walking, right? He could run. He could swim, right? He could drive. All those things are the behaviors, and those are the things. That's how you basically construct an object. So essentially an object is a real world thing, right? A real world entity which contains certain sort of attributes and a behavior. Okay, that's the thing. Then the main thing which comes around the object programming is the principles which are there. The one of the principle is, if I go about, so we have something called inheritance. Okay, we have something called polymorphism. Okay, we have something called encapsulation. Okay, and we have something called abstraction. So these are the four holy grail for our object-oriented programming. The idea of inheritance is that there is already a class or object is there, and you would like to inherit some feature out of it, right? For example, you could say that you have a car, right? A car will have certain attributes, certain behavior, okay? And then you could say that you have a BMW car, right? A BMW car will inherit all the stuff which a car has, and then it might have something better, right? It might be using, say, it might be having an electric engine, okay? So it has all those essentials of the car, so that something BMW car did not have to come up with, it inherited from the other set of a class, okay? When I say class, essentially means it's an entity, okay? Entity means what? Something which exists. For example, car, it exists in a real world, so I say car. A human, a person, those are the entities, they exist, right? So that's what. Something which exists in real world is an entity. That's what the entity is. So we can say like a BMW car. So it basically took certain feature for certain things from it. For example, it also had 4 wheels, right? It also has a steering. It also has an engine. It has all those sort of things, but it has some more features also associated with it, which is just specific to this BMW car. Okay, fine. That is what the inheritance is. And then we have something called polymorphism. So polymorphism states that we can use a thing in a single, so polymorphism is more of a, if I could tell you, maybe it's using like a one form, like one form can have multiple things we could do. This is something, it's more programmatic. That's why I don't want to get into so much into it. So there comes the concept of uh, overriding and over method overloading and overriding. Okay, encapsulation also, it's so much towards the programs. When we get into the programs, then only you will actually be able to understand much. Inheritance is more something which could be explained easily, so that's why I just explained it. But polymorphism, encapsulation, and abstraction, once we really work on a certain programming language like a Java, C#, then it becomes a lot more easier to, you know, make you understand these concepts. And maybe this is something we will be doing in future when you guys will have a little bit idea about the programming languages. Okay. Yeah, something like that, Kapil. Yep. Okay, fine. So we are good with the object-oriented programming. Then comes the another piece of backend development, which is super important for us, which is databases. Okay, and this is super important because when we this today it's all about the data, right? The the data which you have, like for example, the comments which you are getting on Instagram, the post which you are making, all that stuff, that is all entire data that has to sit somewhere, right? And then in order to access that, you need certain program which will be trying to access that, or there should be something which should be holding all that data, and that is where the database comes into the picture, right? So a backend developer will be interacting a lot with the databases. Why? Because the data essentially is what they are processing. They are getting the data from the database, doing some sort of an operation on it, giving it back to the front end. That is what a database that is what a backend developer is doing. So in case of databases, we have multiple databases, but if I need to categorize them, then we could say that we have some, I'm just talking about the popular ones. So one is called RDBMS, which is your relational database management systems. So which use some sort of a relationship. For example, you say you have an employee and then you have a department, right? An employee work for a department, right? So you have two separate entities which are interacting with each other with a relationship, which is work, right? That is your relational database management system. And in here you can have something like databases. So here you basically need to run SQL, structured query language, in order to get the data from these systems. So you have a system which has the data, you would like to get that data from it, right? How do you get that data? You use SQL, structured query programming language. And when we talk about RDBMS, we have many platforms which provide this thing, right? For example, you have SQL Server. This is something you could use, which is provided by Microsoft. Then you have Oracle. You could use Oracle databases, right? You have Postgres. That is another database, right? Okay, somebody asked JDBC. So Vrushali, JDBC is actually a driver. So when I told you that we have a program which is running on the server, right? Which I said will be serving the request. This program is also responsible for getting the data, processing the data, and providing it back, right? If this program is created in your say Java, because you have asked about JDBC. So in order to interact, this program has to interact with this database in order to get the data. And that is where the JDBC comes into the picture. Okay, so Java internally has this concept of JDBC where it basically creates the connection. Okay, so you have one piece of software, a code here, and then you have another piece of code. You remember I talked about integration in the very earlier step where we are testing and integrating. So your particular software, it's not that it will be doing everything by its own. It will be needing a multiple pieces to work as a whole system. So consider this program, which is developed in Java, need to interact to a database like a SQL Server or an Oracle. It can do that by using JDBC. Now, how do we get this JDBC stuff? Again, Java framework itself has provided all that stuff. Okay, you have Java SDK and all that stuff you use. That already contains the libraries and everything to use. Right? It basically allows you to interact with these databases. So that is where the JDBC comes into the picture. It allows you to create a database connection so that your program can interact with the database, get the data, and do all that stuff. Okay. So I was talking about the RDBMS. It is one of the popular ones. So you are still using a lot of relational database system. And around 2010-ish, we also come up with something called NoSQL database. And even the NoSQL databases are quite popular nowadays. When we talk about NoSQL databases, we do not have any specific query language. When I say query language, the one which is actually getting the data from the databases, right? So what I said in the SQL, we are using, be it like a Oracle database, be it the SQL Server, be it any other database, MariaDB or anything. If it is a relational database system, you can use SQL. You can use structured query programming language to get the data. However, when you get into the NoSQL databases, each database have their own way of, or their own set of functions or APIs to get the data. So the most popular NoSQL databases are your MongoDB. Okay. You have your Cassandra. Okay. And then you also have other databases like a graph database, right? Where you put the things in sort of different set of relationships. So you have nodes which are connected with each other. There are vertices. So this is more of a data structure sort of a thing if you know about graph. So that's a little advanced. So don't want to get into it, but yeah, so you can have the graph databases also. But in most cases, you should be good with either of these two databases. So in most cases, your RDBMS and NoSQL works perfectly fine. Okay. Along with this, we are not done with the backend development yet. There are a lot of other things which comes into the picture, which is just not for the backend developer, but it is more of generalized for your front end and backend developer as well, which is towards the DevOps. Okay. DevOps, and also nowadays we are also having cloud, right? So let's maybe move to the next slide and talk about it, right? So when we talk about the backend technologies, I have already told you about the language. The first thing first, you need to have, so you need a way to express yourself, right? How do you express yourself? By a language, right? Right now I'm talking to you because I know a certain language, you also know that certain language, and we can interact. So first thing first, you need to know the programming language. You can choose either of those. You can go by JavaScript, you can go by C#, you can go by Java. These are some of the most popular ones. Okay. So you can choose either of these, build your expertise around it, understand all the constraint around the programming languages, all the basics. You should know how to put the loop, you should know how to put the conditions, you should know how to create the variables, you should know about how the memory allocation are happening in the programming language, all that stuff, right? Because when your program is running, it is actually allocating memory and doing all that stuff. So you should be knowing all that knowledge. You should be having all that knowledge. So that's your JavaScript and C# and Java, PHP, Ruby. A lot of languages are there. You could choose one of those. So the first thing is to choose this language. Once you have the understanding around the language, say suppose you started with JavaScript, or say you started with Java, so you learn the core Java. So you understood how the entire thing works, how the object-oriented principle works and everything. Then you have to choose a backend framework. Again, the same concept applies, right? Which we did in the front end. We learned things and then we went to a framework like Angular, React. Here we also have to get into the frameworks. For example, Spring Boot is one of the framework which you could go for, right? And you have ASP.NET Core or .NET Core, which you could use to develop those sort of applications. So you could decide on the backend framework. So you build your expertise towards the framework. Okay. Then comes the databases. Databases, as we said, you could decide which sort of database you would like to go. Based on what kind of a work you are doing, you can decide which database will suit. It's not one capsule for all, right? You could have a situation where RDBMS will work a lot better than a NoSQL. A NoSQL database really do not manage the relationships. Okay, so there is a lot of data. When the demand of a lot of data is there, that you have to manage a lot of data, all that stuff. In that case, you can probably go for a NoSQL database. Okay, if you have a limited set of data and there is a clear relationship among the data, okay, or maybe you are looking for a lot more security, you are looking for transactions. What is transaction? For example, when you go to a bank and you like from your mobile itself, right? When you do a payment, what happens? The payment get deducted from your account and then it get added to somebody else's account, right? So what is happening? An entire transaction is happening. Now, in between, if it fails, so suppose the account is been deducted for you, 100 rupees is gone from your account, but the other guy didn't really get the 100 rupees, right? So in that case, the transaction has failed. So in that case, what should happen? The entire transaction should fail. It should not be the case that 100 rupees got deducted from your account successfully, but it didn't get added. It didn't get added to the account of the beneficiary, right? That's a problem. So either the entire thing should happen or none of the things should happen. Even that 100 rupees should also go back to your account. And that is what happens in the transactions. So there RDBMS plays a lot because they inherently provide these sort of features which you could use. So it's not like one thing better than another. Again, based on the kind of things you are dealing with, the kind of application you are developing, you will be deciding SQL or NoSQL. Okay. Then we talk about the web servers. So when we talk about these applications, these servers which are running your programs, they are some specialized softwares which we need to install in these one in order to interact with the internet. So that's where the Apache, Nginx, or say IIS or Kestrel. Kestrel is another one which Microsoft has provided. These are the web server which you need to know. Do you need to go so much deep into the web server? Initially, no. Okay, you could just start with any of the web server and just use it. But as the time goes by, as you become more seasoned into the development and you face a lot of problems towards the performance and all that stuff, that is where you would like to utilize a lot of, because these servers provide you a lot of features, like they can provide you the features related to the compression and all that stuff. So that is something you would like to use. A lot of other things comes into the picture. So that's what you can then get deep into it. And when we talk about APIs and web services, again, you could develop the APIs and web services by using the frameworks which you have. SOAP, so we can go by REST and we can go by SOAP. SOAP is, again, it's a protocol which you must have, I guess, studied in your college. Nowadays, it is not so much being used. I mean, it's people are not going more towards it because it's mostly towards the REST they are using it. But SOAP still has its own usage. It's not that it is it's dead, because there are times when you are when you are making interaction with the HTTP. So basically, you have a client which is using HTTP. You have a server which is also HTTP, like internet, for example. So what you do, REST is super clear. So you can go with the REST, no problem whatsoever. However, it's not always that you will be using that. For example, if you're you're creating an IoT device. Okay, so for example, you have a AC and all those sort of things, and they are interacting with your application or the server which you have created. In those cases, it makes a lot of sense to go by the SOAP. Still, SOAP is being used. Okay, again, it depends what kind of a application you are developing. Is it an internet facing application which is following the HTTP? Go ahead and use the REST. No brainer. You don't need to put any brain there. You could go with the REST. However, if you're going towards the other side of it, you have to know about the SOAP as well. Okay, and then Git, it's something which is universal, because here also we are writing the code, there also we write the code, correct? So we need to maintain our code. That's where the Git comes into the picture. We also have mentioned here SVN. It is quite an old bird, so nobody is using this much. You maybe if you get into a corporate, maybe you will find it somewhere, but the likelihood is like very, very, very less that you will be seeing SVN or you will be seeing TFS, because Git is the gold standard now. Everywhere you will be seeing the Git. Okay. Once we are done with these things, we also need to know, or I'll say right now, I will not say it is you need to know, it is good to know. You increase your chances of your resume getting shortlisted, you getting a call for interview, right? When you get into the cloud. If you have the understanding of the cloud, you could go for it. Because with the cloud, most of the companies are using cloud nowadays. Why? Because it helps them in, decreasing the cost and everything. See, earlier what people used to do, like the companies, what they used to do, they actually have to buy the physical servers. They have to own the physical machines, the physical computers, in order to run all these programs which I'm talking about. The one you will be developing by Java, C# and all that stuff, right? So they actually had to own it. Now consider a situation where the business is low, right? That means they are not really getting so much of a request from the customer. Their business is slow and things are not going good. They're still bearing the cost of those servers because they have owned it, right? And most of these servers, they used to get it on lease. So IBM was one of the big provider which used to provide these sort of servers. So they're still on lease, they're still paying for it and all that stuff. Then the cloud came into the picture. The idea of the cloud was, like, consider Azure, for example. Azure is a cloud provided by Microsoft. Okay. So what Azure is saying, that boss, you don't worry about the machines and everything. I will take care of it. I will have all the machines and everything with me. Okay. You just tell me how much do you need. Okay. Tell me which application need to be moved. I will run your application on my servers. Okay. And you pay me as go. I mean, you just pay me on how much you are using. Okay. So for example, today the things are going good. You are having a business which is steady. Probably you just need 4 machines. Okay. Just an example. With 4 machine, you are able to run your business, all good. Then all of a sudden, some sort of a sale comes in. For example, next week, 4th of July, that's an Independence Day for US. And the likelihood is that there will be some sort of sales and all that sort of thing will happen, and people will get into the buying mode. They'll go into the websites, try to buy some stuff because of the discount and all. So for that particular week, you might need a lot more machines, right? So what you could do, you could ask Azure to give me more machines. So Azure can give you more machines. More machines means more customer can interact with your system and can place the order and all that stuff. Now, once that week is over, now you can again come back. You can tell Microsoft, okay, boss, I'm done with the machines. I will pay you for this week or the entire week for long I use your machines. I will give it for you. And then you should be good. I should come back to the same one, right? Achha, let me just show you one example here. Just a small example. So right now you can see that I'm using a Mac, right? This is a Mac machine which I'm using right now. Now I do have a cloud account, right? And with that, what I can do, I can access machines. I mean, that is just one of the feature which you have in the cloud. We'll talk about a little more on the cloud as well. But let's say I would like to access a Windows machine on my Mac. So I'm currently on a Mac. I would like to access a Windows machine. How do I do that? So what I can do, I already have a Windows machine. I could just connect to it. Okay. So this is just one machine which is actually sitting somewhere in the world. Okay. Somewhere. So because this one, it's somewhere in the North India. And I don't need to go physically there to access that machine. What I need to do, I just need to have a cloud provider, which in this case is Azure. Okay. You could see this is a Windows machine and I'm still on my Mac. So if I go on the top, I see the Mac is there. So how I am able to do this thing? Because of the cloud. Okay. So there is a thing called virtual machine, which we could use. Okay. In this particular case, what did I do? I used a virtual machine. Okay. Irrespective of the operating system which you are using, or irrespective of the place where you are, you can access those machines, do all sort of operation which you want to do, right? And that is how cloud is basically changing all the things around you. So that's where it's better that you should be knowing, or at least have some idea around the Azure or any sort of a cloud. But the question comes up, which cloud then, right? Because we have mentioned few here, and this is not just few. I mean, there are a lot. So you have Oracle, OCI is also there. So Oracle also has their own cloud. Then IBM also has their own cloud. VMware also has their own cloud. A lot of other cloud options are there. So what you can do, you can decide either from Azure. I mean, this is just my recommendation. Okay. Azure or AWS. You could just start with either of these. It should not matter which one you are trying with. Okay. Again, the bias is there. Azure, I find it better. Why? Because of the obvious reasons, because it is being developed by the company which I work for. And then you have AWS, right? But the moment you learn any of the cloud, you actually get the idea of all other cloud as well. Consider why. When I talked about the VM, which is a virtual machine, in Azure, we call it as a virtual machine. In AWS, we call it as EC2 instances. It's the same thing. The configuration, most of the things are same. In Azure, we have something called Azure functions. Okay. The same thing in AWS is provided by Lambda. Okay. In Azure, we have something called service bus. Right. In here also, AWS, we have something similar like that. Okay. We have something like SNS service and all that stuff. So you just need to learn one cloud. You need to learn the technologies, like the services which these provides, right? And that's all. And you should be good with the other cloud as well. So for example, if say you took say 3 or 4 months to learn Azure, okay, it took you a good amount of time, and now you know Azure, a lot of things you know about Azure, then the likelihood of you learning AWS within a month is way higher. Okay. So you don't need to put the same amount of effort in learning AWS. Once you know one thing, you will be easily able to transition to another one. Okay. And the same thing actually happens with your programming languages as well. See, as you move forward, you will be learning a lot more programming language. You will not be just doing one programming language. So in my case, I started with C#, then I learned JavaScript, then I went into Java. So I also worked on Java. Then I worked into Python, right? So these are multiple programming languages. So one might think that they have to learn all these languages. Obviously you have to learn it, but you don't need to put so much amount of effort then, because once your basics and everything is clear in one programming language, all those programming language have the similar concept. Okay. You just need to know the concept, only the syntax changes, right? For example, if I need to print something in, I'm just giving one example. I say console.log in JavaScript. Okay. I need to print something on the console. So I just say console.log. If it comes to Java, I say system.out.println, and then I print something. If it comes to C#, I say console.writeLine. See, the basic operation is what? And it comes to, if it comes to our Python, it is print. So the basic concept is what, that you are interacting with something and you're trying to print it out, right? That's one sort of a feature which of a programming language you are using. If you know that sort of a feature exists in JavaScript, you just need to know, okay, what is the syntax to use the same feature in your Java or in your C# or in your Python, right? So this is just one example, right? In all four languages, you just need to put a lot of effort in one programming language, and rest of the languages should be super easy for you to learn. Okay, that should not be much of a issue. Okay, fine. Then we come into the other one, which is full stack developer. A full stack developer. So right now, so far we understood about a backend developer, what a backend developer does, right? What sort of application he maintains, what sort of technologies he uses. And we also talked about front-end developer, what it does, all that stuff. Then comes the full stack development. Full stack development actually combines both of them. So now this is somebody who knows about the backend, okay, and he also knows about the front end. So remember the interaction we talked about, the client and the server. This guy knows about this entire thing. He knows about the client, he knows about the server. He knows how the request is coming to the server, how the server is processing that request and, you know, sending back to the client. And that's where full stack development comes into the demand, because companies tend to find people who can handle both the things. So there could be possibilities, right, that the company might not need a specialization in just one piece of the things, right? Piece of the software. Like, for example, they're just not really looking for a only front-end developer. They're looking somebody who could essentially handle both the things. Okay, that's where the expertise. So obviously it becomes a little harder. If you're just focusing on backend, you're just focusing on the backend. You don't need to worry about the front end. If you're doing front end, you're just focusing on the front end, not worrying about backend. Here you have to worry about both the stuff. So twice the learning, right? So somebody who knows about the full stack development need to know about the front end technologies, which we talked about, and the backend technologies, both the ones he has to know, right? He needs to understand how the architecture and everything is being placed. He really needs to know the server client architecture, how the communication really happens. Okay, he has to continuously learn and update with the technologies, because if something new is coming on the front end, he needs to know that. If something new is coming on the back end, he needs to know that, because he wants to be relevant, right? So that's what the full stack development is. So with full stack development, you can go for one stack. This is a choice which you could make, right? As I said, front-end technologies you need to know, back-end technologies you need to know, database obviously you need to know. Then the other things which we talked about, Git, Webpack, Babel, all that stuff you need to know. We can go with this stack. So a certain, if I need to, you know, narrow it down for you, the quickest way to get into a full stack development, right, which is called MERN stack. So you could go for MERN stack or mean stack. Okay, so we have MERN stack. In that, what do we do? First thing is your database, which is your Mongo. Okay, then E is your Express.js. Express.js, why? Because I remember when I talked about Node.js is capable of creating multiple sort of programs. When we specifically looking for a RESTful program, a API, then we use Express.js. In order to create the front end, we go with the React.js here. Okay, and in order to create the backend, we go with the Node. Okay, so once you know this, you should be able to create a application from front end to back end. That means a website also you'll be able to create. You will also be able to create a API. Now, why one stack? Because all these technologies actually uses JavaScript. So you just need to learn one programming language, which is JavaScript, and you should be good to take care of all these things. Okay, so that's why it is the most easiest, not easy, easy is not the correct term. I'll say it's most how should I put it? In a way, it's more valuable, because you start with one programming language and then you kind of gain the expertise in all the corner of the software development, right? So with that, you could maybe think of one stack, that one of the things which you might want to learn. Other thing can also be like this, right? So then maybe you will learn Spring Boot, you know about Spring Boot, you will know about ASP.NET Core, and then you also know about Angular. That can also be a way. That can also be a way. But again, when you go by this route, you have to learn multiple programming language. You have to learn Java, right? You have to learn Java framework. Then you have to learn your JavaScript, CSS, React.js, Angular, whatever it is. So the learning path or the learning curve, so to say, is a bigger in if you keep a separate programming language in both the end, in the back end and the front end. However, if you keep just JavaScript, the learning curve is a little down. And that is the reason you don't have Angular here, right? Because in Angular, you have to learn TypeScript as well. In React, you don't really need to learn TypeScript. JavaScript is all something which you could go for. Okay. Any questions you guys have till here? The roles which we talked about, the software development in general, like the front end development, back end development, and the full stack development. Anything you have it? Fine. I see most of you are good with it. Great. Let's talk about. So we understood the technology aspect of it, right? That what all technologies we need to learn in order to create programs, in order to serve those programs. And one thing I deliberately did not tell you about, which is DevOps. Okay, just to keep this session now, to overflow, like I just want to make sure that doesn't overflow you. But there is another thing which is called DevOps. DevOps, just to give you an idea, it's about, so you have created a software. Okay, you have developed a software. Now this software has to move, it has to go live, right? It's basically an infrastructure. You have to put it on the infrastructure. It has to go live. And that is where the DevOps comes. So in DevOps also, you have multiple technologies. You must have heard about Docker. You must have heard about Kubernetes, Docker Swarm, right? These are different set of technologies which are required in order to deploy the software into a certain location and then manage the software. You remember the maintenance phase we talked about, how this entire thing works. That is all load balancer you put. So consider just a small example. So suppose the example which I gave you about 4 machines which a company was using. So what they do, they actually put something called a load balancer, which balances the load among these machines. So a request will be coming to the load balancer, and the load balancer will be decide which one to send it to. Obviously, at a time, only one machine will serve the request, right? And if you have 100 of machines, this load balancer is deciding where to move it and all that stuff. Doing all these sort of configuration and deploying the things, installing the softwares, all that stuff, that is comes into the realm of your DevOps. Okay. So when we talk about full stack developer, he still needs to know all that stuff, because he kind of knows, because there are companies, in most of the companies, what happens, you have a separate role for a quality engineer. For example, a tester will be a different guy. A DevOps person will be a different person. And then you have a developer. He could be a full stack developer, or he could be a front end developer, and like that. But then there are companies who just have one guy and he's actually doing everything. He knows about testing as well. So there are companies which do this thing. Okay. So you have one developer, he developed one piece of feature. Then you have another developer, he developed another piece of feature. Now this developer will be testing his changes, and this developer will be testing his changes. Even these things are also happening. Okay. But again, this is something which is not so common practice, but these are also happening. So most of the times the tester job is little different. I mean, that you will always have a separate guy who will be testing your code, right? But the DevOps things, many companies have a separate role for this. Site reliability engineer, we call them. So there are separate role for them, but then there are places where you don't really have the role for that, and the expectation is that you should be taking care of it, right? So I didn't want to tell you about it because I don't want to overwhelm you. Like you will be like, "Arey yaar, I have to learn so much. How will I be able to do this?" It will happen. The things will work out once you start. Like slowly, gradually, you will learn things. You will see how all the pieces are getting connected together. Once you have developed one software, you have written one program, you will understand, okay, how do I move? How do I first put it into the Git? You moved it to Git. You understood about the Git. Then you learn about some softwares like Jenkins, right? Ansible and all those things. How these softwares are enabling you to take this code from here, then moving this code to a server machine, deploying that code to the server machine. This entire cycle will become easier once you start. The first thing is to start. Okay. Don't get overwhelmed by the technologies which you need to learn. You will not be learning all of these things in one go. Okay. Slowly, things will evolve. So don't worry about it. But yeah, just to give you a background, things like these exist. Okay. Now, this is something we talked about, the technologies and all that stuff. What are the inherent qualities you should be having within yourself in order to, excel in this software development, or at least have a better career in the software development? The foremost and the super important thing is this, that you should be having a problem solving skill and analytical skills. Okay, I have got one question. What is that? Should I need to learn Docker or AWS or testing when I'm applying for fresher job? Kapil is asking whether he needs to learn Docker, AWS, or testing while applying for a fresher job as a Munstack developer. Kapil, it is not must to have. I mean, it is not that they will be asking you for sure that you need to know that, but it is good to know. If you can say, suppose if you have done the full stack development, you're good with the Munstack and you know most of the concept and you feel that you are confident in Munstack, then what you can do, you can start with cloud, right? You can just pick Azure, AWS, and start to learn a little bit on it. They just want you to be aware of it. Okay, they will not be expecting a lot of thing from this thing, right? So the first priority for you should be the Munstack. Okay, get into it, learn it, then move to the other ones. I hope it makes sense. Okay, yeah, coming back to it, even if you don't know, still acceptable. But again, you have two candidates, right? One who knows about the cloud as well, the other one who doesn't. So the likelihood of, the one who knows the cloud is better, right? So he might get a better opportunity like that. But again, not at the cost of Munstack. It's not that you don't really know about Munstack and you got into the AWS also, you got into Azure also. So you have learned a lot of things. Basically, तुमने खिचड़ी बना ली है, तो खानी तो पड़ेगी, कौन खाएगा उसको, right? So make sure that do it step by step. First, have your fundamentals clear. Then get into the frameworks. Make sure your frameworks are clear. Good. Then move to the other side. Cool. That's the thing. Okay. Problem solving skill and the analytical skills. So this is a super important thing which you need to have. So you should be ready to take on the problem. Okay. Try to think for a solution, because when you are a developer, what you are doing, you are not expecting that you will get a solved problem and you just have to implement it. So you will get a problem. You need to come up with the idea. How are you planning to implement it? Right. So you should be having the problem solving skills, the analytical skills you should be having. One way to build on these things is DSC. And that is something which is being asked in your interviews a lot, right? A data structure and algorithm. So when you do data structure of algorithm, you essentially work with problems. You try to understand how to tackle a problem, how to find the solution for it, right? All the stuff. We'll talk a little bit on the DSA in few minutes. Okay. And then the programming skills. It's been an hour, I guess, and we were all about the programming skills which we were talking about. Obviously, you need to know that. Then only you'll be able to develop the things. Then comes the collaboration and communication, which is super important, right? You might be a very good programmer, okay, but if you're not having a good communication skills, if you're not able to express yourself clearly, then it's a problem, right? See, English is also super important here. Why? Because when we talk about communication, the likelihood that you will get into a company where you will be working with say international, like, so you will be working with US, Australia, Europe, or any other country. You will be interacting with them in your in English, right? If it is just about your local region, then probably you can, with your local colleagues, you might use your native language, but with those people, you have to use English, right? And then you have to make sure the idea which you are expressing, or at least what they are saying, you are able to understand it, and what you are saying, they are able to understand it, right? So the collaboration and communication is super important here, because you will be collaborating with your own India team. Along with that, you are also working with your sister teams, which are there in a different geographical location, right? So that's where it becomes super important. So you do have to have that attention for details. Obviously, when you are working, you want to make sure that you have an attention for detail. Why? You don't want to create a software which is having a lot of issues. That's not something the aim for, right? Because if you are creating a software, creating a program, creating a things which is having a lot of issues, and your testers are telling, okay, boss, this thing is having a mess, a lot of issues are there, the likelihood of you losing that job becomes way higher, right? And then the adaptability and the continuous learning. This is super important, because as you see, right, a lot of technologies I have already told you, and there are a lot of technology which I did not really tell you. So many technologies are there which you have to keep on learning. A new thing will come up, you have to learn that, right? So you should be adaptable, you should be ready to do that, right? Adaptable in the sense, many times this can also happen. Consider my situation, right? I started with a business analyst, right? But I felt this is not a good job for me. This is not something for me. I was adaptable enough to move into a development environment. Okay. For example, maybe tomorrow you start with the development and you probably feel that this is not something going good with your career, or maybe you are not seeing yourself, moving up in the ladder in this direction. Probably you can think of, okay, can I move to something different role? You should be adaptable to it. You should be able to run for it. Maybe you could look for a scrum master role, or a product manager role. We'll talk about it in some time. So you should be adaptable. That's all what I'm trying to tell. Other thing is problem domain knowledge. You should be knowing the domain which you are working for. So when you work in companies, when you work on softwares, you essentially also gain knowledge on the domain which you are working. For example, I have a knowledge on the ERP systems. I have worked on the ERP systems. I have worked on insurance systems, so I know how the insurance thing work. I have worked in the telecom system, so I know how the telecom works, right? I have worked in the file sharing system, so I know how the file sharing, how the protocols, how this entire thing works, right? Right now I'm working in a database system, so I know how a database internally works and all that stuff. So this is your domain knowledge, which you keep on gathering, right? Because consider you're working in a bank, like you're working for, say, Goldman Sachs, you're working for Morgan Stanley. The likelihood of you going into JP Morgan and Morgan Stanley becomes higher because you already know about the kind of work they do. If somebody is coming from a different background, in the sense a different domain knowledge, he is having knowledge on, say, telecommunication, and you have a knowledge on the banking, and the company you are applying for is a banking company, the likelihood of you getting a job becomes a way higher because you have already worked with those problems which these people are going to be facing, right? So that's the thing. Okay. Again, this is something we have already covered. We need to know at least we have to start with one programming language. That has to be object-oriented programming language. You could go with C#, you could go with Java, you could go with JavaScript. These are some of the popular ones. My favorite is this one for obvious reasons, right? After that, it's Java, and obviously JavaScript, if you're planning to go into the MERN stack, super important, right? And then you have other programming languages. Not so much of a fan of PHP. I mean, I'm not recommending that you should not be learning it. I am not so much of a fan. Okay, that's why. Fine. And fine, let's move ahead. Now, when we talked about problem solving abilities, right? How do you build these abilities? How do you become better in this, right? The first thing which I told you about the data structure, right? In data structure, you have to go, there are a lot of data structure. So to say, I'll just explain you a few. We have arrays, right? We have string, we have stack, we have queues, we have trees, we have graph, right? We have segment trees. Okay, we have heap. A lot of data structure is there. Start slow, start with arrays, try to understand how array works, try to do certain problems on arrays, try to do some problems on string, do something on the stack. Now, what is stack? Stack is a LIFO structure. That means last in, first out. So what is a data structure? When you have data, you would like to store it to some place, right? For example, you have a data related to 100 students. You would like to put it to some place. So that is where the data structure comes into the picture. So I can put that data in some sort of a stack. So what is a stack? Last in, first out. That means whatever you'll be putting into the stack last, that will be the first thing which will come out, right? Then you have something called a queue. A queue is a FIFO, first in, first out structure, right? Consider, and we use these structures, right? For example, your printing job, whenever you print any file, say you just print, say, 10 files. The first file, the first in, first out, the first file which went in will be the first file to out, right? So these data structures are actually being used in your day-to-day development, right? Development activities. But again, it's not so much. For example, trees and graph, these things, if you're working on a very specialized problem, then probably you will be using trees and graph in a day-to-day basis, but otherwise you might not be using it so much. But again, you need to know these things in order to get better with the data structure, or at least have an edge in interviews. So the first thing first, right? You try to identify what the problem is. You go through the problem, understand what it is, define the scope for it, right? What all things can be done. Try to explore that options. So consider you come up with a couple of options and try to explore which one could be better. And then that's where the action comes into the picture. You solve the problem, you whatever the solution you have come up with. First thing is to solve the problem. You have solved the problem, good. Now you have to look back. Why you need to look back? Because the solution which you have identified might not be the best one. Okay, you have solved the problem, that is good. That was the first thing which was required. At least you should have a solution. So you have got the problem with you, you have solved it. Now you would like to know how better I can solve this problem, and that is where you look back and try to find a better solution for it. Okay. Vrushali is asking how to improve logical. So logical, Vrushali, the thing is, you have in programming languages, what do you have mostly? It's conditions, you have loops and all that stuff, right? And the data structure. How do you put these things together? That is what improves your logical skills. So what you do, you start with basic programs. So you will like very simple program, finding a prime number, whether a number is a prime number or not. So you understand how to put the loops, how to put the conditions together. These are the things which you understand. As you move, you can go for a higher programs. Okay, so there are certain platforms which you could use, okay, which can help you in building these skills. Okay, we'll talk about these platforms in a minute. Okay, and then we talked about the attention for details, because you wanted to make sure the product you are delivering is robust, it's not really having any issues or anything. And you should be also, as a developer, you should also be having these practices, which is unit testing, integration testing, and code reviews, right? So many times the software which we have created, the applications which I have developed, we developer write the unit test case for that. Means, for example, if for very simple things, so if I have created a program to sum two numbers, so I will write a test case for it to make sure it is always giving the sum. It should not be the case that I'm asking it to sum two number, 2 plus 2 equals to 4, but my program is giving the data 5, right? If that is happening, there is a problem. So I put a unit test in place that if someday my program is misbehaving or doing something wrong, I should get prompt. I should get to know, oh, there is a problem. I should go and fix that. Then comes the integration testing. Integration testing, remember, I gave you one example. You have a software which is dealing with like your websites, having payment gateway, all that stuff, whether all that thing are in place, whether all that stuff is working or not, right? All the pieces are connected together properly or not. That is where the integration testing comes into the picture. We have code reviews. Why do we do code reviews? Because see, consider we are working in a team. Like I developed some code. So I came up with an idea, I developed it. It might not be the best idea, right? So there are people who will review your code, will see, okay, boss, this could be done in a different way. Can you try this? Or maybe that can be a healthy discussion where you could come up with a better solution, right? That's the main intention around the code reviews. So you find out it's not about finding the problem in the code. Okay, you are basically trying to understand the code from a different perspective, trying to see if this could be done in a better way or what else can be done there. And if you see, okay, code review, somebody like, for example, I wrote the code, you reviewed the code, and you said, okay, it is good. Then we finally say, okay, this is good, and we can put it to the main code base, and we can actually ship it to the customer, or customer can use it. Fine. Collaboration and teamwork. I have already told you that we need to have a very effective communication. Okay. First, start with a normal communication. Try to be an active listener. Try to listen. Okay. Try to talk to within yourself. Try to improve your English. Try to improve, your writing, your other sort of skills, right? Because you will be reading a lot of documents. You will be writing a lot of documents. Okay. It is not just about the development. When you create a software, you have created software, then you document as well. You do tell, okay, what it is doing. So you do these kind of work as well in these day-to-day activities. Does include this also, that you will be writing documents, you will be reading the documents, all that sort of things. The requirements which are coming, you have to read those documents, understand those things, right? And when we say collaboration, again, because you are working with the multiple teams, and the teams could be in the same location, could be in a very different location. For example, me, I work. So I have worked. So right now, most of the work which we do are doing with the US folks, right? Then I have worked with the people who were in Australia. I have worked with the people in past. I have worked with the one who were in the UK, who were in the Europe, right? So you will get all sort of people, right? So you should be always adaptable, and you should be able to collaborate irrespective of the location of those people are, right? And have an effective communication. Okay, now comes the continuous learning and how do you improve yourself, and the question which Roshali asked, how to improve your logical skills, how to make yourself a better developer. In terms of improving your logical reasoning, making your analytical skills a bit stronger, there are certain platforms you could go for, right? For example, this is something like must have heard about lead code. Lead code is something you can go with. Hacker Rank. Okay, there is Hacker Rank, there is Hacker Earth. Okay, these are certain platforms which you could go. What these platforms have, right? They will have some questions. Okay, let me just even show you one. If you haven't seen, I guess most of the people must have seen it, but yeah, just in case. Okay, let me just sign in. Okay, you can see this. Okay, we just log into this guy. So this is like one of the platform. You could just go to explore. Okay, or maybe go to the problems. Okay, so you can get set of problems here. Okay, what you can do for the very initial step when you're starting, just sort the problems by their difficulty. Okay, let's start with the easy problems. Okay, let's for example, two sum is one of the one. Open that, try to code it. So within this platform itself, you can write the code. Okay, try to solve this problem. With this, your analytical skills will improve. Why? Because you are going through this problem statement, trying to understand what they're asking for. Okay, coming up with a solution. Okay, and this solution has to work with multiple test cases. Test cases in the sense multiple scenarios. It should work. So what you do with this, you get an eye for details. You know what sort of conditions you have to put, what kind of edge cases you might get, right? So this basically helps you in that. So this is one way that you could go and improve your analytical skills. Like lead code is one which I feel is the most well-known, and the one which has a very good kind of questions which you could go for. Hacker Rank, Hacker Earth, also other ones. I mean, it depends again. If whatever the platform you like, you can probably go for it. Okay, now here also what you need to understand, it's all about the consistency. Okay, it is not about that one day you felt like, okay, I'm going to be doing lead code. You just took like in a single day, you did like 1, 10, 15 question, you just did it, and after that you're gone. Okay, what you need to understand, it is more about your consistency than the volume. If every day you are able to do one question, that is good enough. That's not a problem. You can start with very slow. Even if you're taking 2 days to solve one problem, that is also all right. The main thing is the consistency. If you keep yourself consistent over the time, you will have a good amount of questions being done by you, right? And you'll have a good skills developed. Okay, don't just go with the volume. It should not be the case that within just 1 month you did it, and after that, like, you just left it. Rather, you should be doing it on come up with a routine for yourself. It could be every week, it could be every day, right? Something like that. Come up with some routine which is good for you, because see, a routine for me may not, like, so a routine which I might be following will not work for you, right? So I will not give you a routine what to do, right? You have to decide. Maybe a time, maybe you feel good in the morning, pick a question, try to work on it in the morning. Maybe evening works better for you. Sit around 5 o'clock, 6 o'clock, give 15, 20, 30, 40 minutes. Start with 30 minutes, then 40, 50, like that. Keep on growing. That's how you can do it. But the main thing is the consistency here. Okay, and most of the people lose out because they go by the volume. That first what they have it in their mind to do as many questions as they can do, right? They just get into that, and sooner or later they get overwhelmed and they just feel burnout and they just couldn't cope up. That should not happen with you. Try with small and keep building on it. Okay, तो क्या करना है? Small बनाना है, large बनाना है. ठीक है? Small मिलाते जाओ, large बनाते जाओ. So that's what you can do. Cool. Fine. Now this is good. So far we understood the idea about the career which we probably could go for, the front end development, back end development. We are also sort with the kind of skills we need to have, the data structure which we need to have. All that stuff you have, but now the real thing comes up, which is the job search and the career. Like how do you improve in that? How do you go about it? The first thing first which you could do, the things which you are doing, the code which you are developing, the problems which you are solving, everything. If you have created a website, all that stuff, have a GitHub portfolio. Okay, create a GitHub account, put your things there, create a portfolio for yourself, create a small website. You can easily put that website on the GitHub itself. You don't really need to pay anything. Okay, and anybody can access that website. Create a website, create a portfolio yourself. Okay, if you're considering yourself as a front-end development, put your project which you have done in the front end. Show people what you have done. Okay, so that if somebody is asking, is calling for your interview, they already know that you actually know and have actually worked on these sort of technologies, right? They already know this thing by seeing your portfolio. That is something you can do, right? Highlight the things which you think are the best from you. For example, you might have worked on 2 or 3 projects, but you feel this is the one project which actually did justify the kind of work you have done, right? So that's something you can highlight. That's something you can do. Your problem solving abilities, even your Git, this thing, right? Even if you're writing lit code, you're writing solving problems, put it on the GitHub, have a new repository, create a folder saying that problem solvings, put it there. So that the people, if at all they are visiting your GitHub profile, they know that you are into these stuff. You do problem solvings, right? So they'll know about it. So try to do that. Okay. Another thing which you could do, there are things with related to networking, how you could basically improve your network. The best thing is your LinkedIn. Have a LinkedIn account, reach out to professional people. Okay, follow some of the people. You can follow me. Okay, so you can just follow people, see what they are doing. Okay, go to their profile, see what sort of work they have done. Okay, because where are you right now, right? You are in a college, you don't really know what you're doing, all that stuff. Even I was there, other people were also there, right? See what those guys have done in their college. Like some of the people do mention their college projects, what they have done, or see what all companies they have worked, what their sort of career path was, right? With that you can get an idea that how you can move among the companies. For example, you could see, okay, you just open one of the profile of somebody, see, okay, so this guy started from this company, okay, this sort of a work he was doing, okay, then he moved to this company, okay, then again he did this and that. So you get an understanding, you build an understanding how the entire thing works, right? Also, what you can do, this is super important, if you can do it, it will be super awesome, which is open source projects. So what you can do, you can just go to the open source project. Some of the open source project like React.js is an open source project, a lot of other projects are there, and these open source project you guys can contribute to, right? Sometimes what happens, nothing is perfect, right? Even these code have some sort of issues. So there are certain issues which are being mentioned where the people can contribute. So what you could do, you could see, okay, this could be improved. You could suggest, this is a change I would like to do. And there you interact with a lot of other folks, right? Like you, a lot of other people will be coming to these GitHub accounts, putting the PR is a pull request, right? All that stuff they'll be doing. If your change which you have done is being taken by the community, then you could say, okay, my changes has been done. This is something you can highlight in your profile, that you are an active open source contributor, right? So these things you could do. You can expand your LinkedIn professional, like you could follow the professional forums, you can follow the LinkedIn you could follow, you could connect with most of the people, try to see if they can check with them, if they can give you some sort of insight, they can provide you some sort of an opportunity, right? These, but again, when you are using LinkedIn, just be a little mindful that you are not annoying people. Okay, they don't start annoying people. Okay, this is super important. Just don't start sending connection requests to a lot of people, asking a lot of stuff to them, because you have to plan it well. Okay, see the person actually you want to waste your time with, like at least this is a person who could help you, or at least his content is good and all that stuff. Don't just simply just go or jaake LinkedIn mein gadar macha do. Don't do that. Okay, so just be mindful of that. Okay, the other strategies which comes in is mostly around the job search. Is you could go to the there are a lot of recruitment agencies. You must be knowing about these other sites, like Naukri.com is there. There is InstaHire, right? Indeed.com. InstaHire is a good one. You could go for it. Naukri, definitely it's a good one. Have your profile created there. Mention all your education qualifications and everything there. And if you get a call and apply, like have your resume. Even in the LinkedIn, if you go, there are jobs, you can go open the jobs, apply to those jobs, apply to the company's site itself. There are many, like for example TCS, and there are many other companies who do have these sort of events which they do, where they invite people to come and do the coding, and then if you do that, then they basically select you for interviews and all that stuff. So keep an eye on those things around the LinkedIn. Okay, बस Instagram में रोल मत करते रहो. Just have an eye on the LinkedIn भी. Just you could open some time in your in a day and see what all stuff is happening around the world, and maybe you could just attend one of these events, and probably that can help you in landing a job, right? Okay, so when we talk about the interview preparation, the first thing first is resume, right? So resume, make sure that you are not creating a very big resume. It should not be like 2-3 pages and you have put it. See, you are a fresher, even me, right now, say I have these many years of experience, my resume is hardly 1 page. You just put the stuff which is super important to you. Okay, so if you just put the technologies which you are very good at, for example, if you are a very good front-end developer or back-end developer, highlight those technologies, maybe have it in the bold. Do call it out in your resume that you are very good in data structure. If you are, do call it out. Tell about your projects which you have done. Okay, clearly give a description about the project which you have done in the order. For example, if you have done 3 projects, and out of that, this one project is super important and you know a lot about it, you use databases, everything you used in there, and that's a really good one. Put it on the top, right? Highlight it so that people can see that. Okay, so first thing is the resume, because that's the first thing which somebody will be seeing, correct? And then comes the technical skills. So obviously technical skills, you have to improve on your Javas, like your programming languages, frameworks, problem solving. I've already told you about. You could go for the lead code, you could go for the other free materials which is around the world. Like I'll tell you about some other material in just a bit. But yeah, so that's what you should be doing. Fundamental concepts you should be clear, right? For example, when I was talking about the backend development, you should have your fundamental understanding around the operating system. What is a process, right? How the scheduling works in process, all that stuff you should have the idea on. When we talk about databases, what are the fundamentals of databases, right? How does the relationship work? What is normalization is in database? What is the difference between your NoSQL databases and SQL databases? Why you should be going for a SQL and not for SQL, not for SQL, like all those sort of things. Again, for the practice, lead code. From my side, you can go for the lead code, but again, you can also go for HackerRank and other ones as well. Okay, be prepared for this thing also, a behavioral interview. So this is also a thing now and super important. So you might be able to clear the technical rounds. Okay, so you're good technically, you are super, you are like whatever the problem these guys are giving you, you are able to solve it. Then comes the behavioral round. They wanted to see what essentially they are trying to do or evaluate on your behavioral. So basically they are trying to find out how good you are able to manage, okay, or how easily you can work with the team. So they'll be asking you multiple type of questions. They could ask you, how will you handle a conflict? For example, there is a change which you want to do, right? You did a code change, you raised a request for it, and then there is a colleague who is raising a lot of issues on it. How will you handle these sort of situations, right? What will you do if client is asking some sort of a requirement which doesn't really make sense? Okay, or your business analyst is coming up with some sort of an absurd requirement. How will you handle that? So these kind of questions, which is basically how you will be working in a workspace, right? How you will be contributing, how will you be collaborating? So these kind of questions which comes up. So they want to see whether you will be a good fit or not. So there could be a possibility that you are a very good coder, you are a very good programming skills, everything you have, but you don't really have the people skill. Okay, so what will happen? This will drop down your chances drastically. Okay, so be sure that you also think towards the behavioral questions. Again, communication is the key here. How better you are able to communicate yourself, that's something you need to know. Okay, or if you build on it, right? Okay, so when we talk about the career opportunities and the growth opportunities you can have in software development, when you start, so obviously you start as an SDS, so normal software developer, right? After that, you could go to a senior developer position, and then as you keep growing, you can go to the technical architect, technical lead sort of a position, right? Project manager, product manager, this is some sort of a different line, I would say. I mean, many companies, after a certain level, a developer moves to a project manager role and all those sort of things. But then there are companies where this role is entirely different. So you have a technical line which is different, and then there's a program manager line which is like completely different. So they are like very two separate parallel lines. Okay. So you need to see like how you want to do, right? There could be a possibility that you went with the software development for a while and you realize that this is not something which is working out for you. Could happen, right? Not everyone can be a developer. maybe, but you started, you know, development, but you are seeing that it's not working out for you. So probably you could go to the product manager sort of a role, try to get into there. From the company itself, you could do it. Okay. And maybe you started with a program manager sort of a role, right? A business analyst like me, like how I started, and you felt, okay, this is not the place for you, this is not the work you want to do, and then you can probably move to a different role. See, I got one role, business analyst. I didn't like it. I moved to the software development. I liked it and I stayed. That's the reason I'm staying here. The moment I feel, okay, now software development also is not so much, I'm not liking it anymore or whatever it is, then probably I might look for a different role. Okay. So try to do the things which you kind of like. Okay. And in this industry, in the IT industry, you will find a lot of roles which will be interesting to you, right? Just try to uh, keep an eye like what all things are happening around you and see if you could work on those things. When you're working with different industries, make sure that you have the domain knowledge for it, right? Like I told you, for me it's ERP. I can say I can work for a company which works on, like, I have better chances of working on the companies which are working on ERP, which are working on insurance, which are working on telecom, which are working on file sharing, which are working on cloud databases and all that stuff, right? That thing. Apart from this is like normal. You could also look for freelancing and consulting opportunities, right? Like, consider this is also sort of a consulting thing which is happening right now, right? So AlmaBetter reached out to me whether you can give any session or not, right? This is not part of my day-to-day job, but I can do this thing as well, right? So this is sort of thing you can do once you reach a certain level, right? And this is like super important. Like, this is I cannot emphasize more on this, but continuing education and skill development, because what the kind of technologies what you have today, tomorrow you might have a very different set of technologies, right? So just an example, jQuery was a framework which was being used a lot. It's not that it's not being used today, but people are not really using it so much now, right? You have a lot more other frameworks which came in. So if you will be stubborn and you'll be like, okay, I just know only these set of technologies, if I get a job within this, good, otherwise no, you're not going to be learning. So it's going to be super painful for you at some point of time. So make sure whatever new is coming, try to learn it. Go to blogs, see what all is happening in the LinkedIn. Is there a new thing which is coming in the front end development or a back end development or whatever the thing you are trying to do? Try to do more certifications, right? You can go for, if you're planning to do cloud, get the certificate for the Azure, get the certificate for AWS, because that helps, right? When a recruiter, when an HR is seeing your resume, and if he sees a resume where you have mentioned that you have done the certification on this, so that becomes a bonus point, right? For you, it becomes a bonus point that you have done that. So it's a checklist for you. So like that, you could probably add more things into your skills, okay? And keep evolving. Okay, career transition. Again, this is something I've already talked about. It's not that if you have started with one thing, you will be stuck to that. There are always ways to get around. Same example, business analyst to development. Development can go to Scrum role, Scrum Master role, right? Something like that can happen. For that, you can always go from some sort of a coding boot camps, which are going to be telling you about certain things, right? For example, Munstack is like super popular nowadays. You could probably join some sort of a coding boot camp, which is providing you the all the necessary information around how to develop an application through Munstack, right? You have your online courses platform, you have AlmaBetter, you have Coursera, you have Udacity, you have Free Code Camp. A lot of things are there, right? The content is there. You just need to find it. Okay, that's all. If I can use, see, it's all about the intent and the how passionate you are about it. For example, if a new movie comes up, okay, and you don't want to go to a theater and you want to download it, you will find some ways or another to download that movie, be it Telegram or be it some other website. You will go and you will download, you will be able to achieve that. The same thing happens here as well. If you are ready to learn JavaScript, if you are really into JavaScript, really into Java or whatever it is, there are plethora of resources which are available in the internet. You can just find and explore them. Some of the resources I'll be telling you in a minute, but yeah, that's the thing. Okay. And this is also super important, self-study and the side projects. In the college nothing much happens, right? So that's where the self-study comes in. In my case also, I didn't really learn much from the college. All the things which you do, which I learned, I actually did it and then I learned it, right? So self-study is super, super, super important. And try to do that. Have some courses, try to learn by yourself, see the thing which you like and try to work on it, okay? Again, you can all, because once you know how to develop website and all that sort of stuff, you could even go for freelancing work. Freelancing work is where you have somebody is asking that this is a project, can you do it? Then you'll be bidding for it, that I'll be doing it for this much amount of money. There will be multiple people who will be bidding for it, and if they are okay with you, then probably you'll be get the bid, and you'll be working it on that particular piece of thing, and you'll be getting the money for it, right? So you could even think about that thing. And that's so much in the front. So you have a lot of more chances of freelancing in front end in compared to back end. But again, you do have the chances. It's not that you do not have, but comparatively, I'm saying. So you could go for the sites like Upwork is there, Freelancer is there, where you could go create your profile, tell the work which you have done. Again, your GitHub account will come handy here. The kind of work you have done, you could just showcase that. You can also go for this thing, entrepreneurship. You could go. You could create a app by yourself. See if you see a market for it. You can create an app, develop it, put it on Android, put it on iOS. Let's see if it works. Try to solve a problem and see things will work out for you, right? That's how you could maybe go about it. Now, talking about the industry demand and the job prospects, what we have, we can clearly see the amount of jobs which we have in the software developer profile compared to any other jobs, right? So it is way more than this. So that's the reason a lot of people are getting into the software development, because they are seeing the requirement here and there are the demand, there is a demand, right? So you can clearly see with these numbers. So that's what I'm trying to tell. You could have a very good career in software development. It's just that you just need to make sure that you have the enough skill to, to have a job, to basically secure a job here. Okay. And with this, I can say that AlmaBetter is providing you these resources, which probably you could, these are some of the free resources which are available, right? You could maybe start with these certain articles which are being provided. There are tutorials and other things which you could go for. Maybe AlmaBetter team will tell you more about it on this stuff. Any questions you guys have for me before? Maybe we'll have one small quiz just to see like if you guys were actually listening to me or not. Okay. Okay. Okay, you got a feedback link. If you get a chance, do give a feedback. And let's do one thing. Let me just start for a quiz. Let's see. So I have just started a quiz here, and you guys can join this. So all you need to do is you have to go to Kahoot. Okay, and you have to put that pin. You have to put this pin. I can ping this link in the chat, and you guys can join this. What? Nobody is interested or what? Seems like we are having a bit of an issue in the quiz. People are having some issues there. Maybe Narendra, you can take this thing later on.
Oh, sure, we can skip that thing as of now because we don't have enough audience for that, I think.
Cool.
Yeah, sure.
Fine, then I'm pretty much done from my end. Guys, if you have any questions, you can put it on the chat. I'll try to answer those, and otherwise we can call it a session then.
Guys, I'll go through the AlmaBetter. Sure, Neeraj. I'll share my screen.
Maybe I can leave this session then.
Yeah, yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Thanks, guys.
Guys, first I'll discuss about AlmaBetter. AlmaBetter bytes. So we have bytes. I'll just show you here. In AlmaBetter bytes, we have articles, tutorials. In articles, you can find various articles on web development, data science, and careers in tech. We push daily articles in this byte section, so you can refer them whenever you want to. Or if you want to enroll into our free courses, you can do that through. Here we have data science, Node.js. So if I click on Node.js, I can I can learn here. So all this material is for free of cost. So you can go through all these courses. You can do this course and you can get certificate also. As you can see, JavaScript, HTML, SQL, all these free courses. I'll also tell you about our YouTube channel. In our YouTube channel, you can see there are a lot of playlists, Python for beginners, SQL for data analysis. All these are free playlists. You can watch them at any time. And we also have on our LinkedIn page, we post informative content. As you can see, we can also join our live masterclass session from LinkedIn also. As you can see, we post an informative carousel. As you can see, we also have Telegram channels, the better jobs, where you will get daily updates on job related content and AlmaBetter discussion forum. I'll show you. Yeah, I'll show you this. So here is our Telegram channel. Here you will get daily updates on jobs on various roles. You can apply them, and this is for free of cost. You can join this channel, the better jobs, and you can also join our official AlmaBetter channel. You'll get daily updates here. And this is a discussion forum. You can join here also. You can ask any doubts you have regarding the course or anything. You can ask them. I'll also show you Discord. You can join our Discord also. Here you can see resume tips, interview tips, job updates. And here the best thing is that here you can see a lot of members are already in. You can ask them whatever doubts you have, anything you can ask them. So as you can see, we are the community first learning platform where students can study in groups, do projects in teams, and get job ready. I'll also show you one thing. 1 minute. I'll show you our community. I'll show you community. So yeah, before community, here you can see we have this is a student dashboard. In learning session, you will get all the course. These are the free courses, you can access them. And here is the main course, you can access that too. If you are enrolled into our course, you'll get all the updates here. If you have any classes, you can practice your code here. And here you can get all the projects. Then here is a AlmaX career track. I'll tell you about AlmaX in a bit. And you'll also get mentorship. Right. Let me open community app. Yeah, here is our community app. It's only for students. So all the students will be available here. So you can talk to them, you can ask your doubts, you can post your queries. So as you can see, it's the students platform. They'll share their doubts, they'll share their informative content. Or as you can see, you can just enroll by signing up. So if you want to try, you can try by watching the free content on our platform. Then you can enroll. After enrolling, after completing the course, you will sign for ISA. Then you'll go through AlmaX. Then you'll get placed. So as you can see, live lectures, lab experiments, project assignments, group discussions, all these things you can do. So these are our hiring partners. As you can see, most of the students get more than like around 8 to 9 lakhs per annum. So these are our mentors and instructors. As you can see, they are from Microsoft, Swiggy, Dream11, IBM. So these are our success stories. You can find them on our LinkedIn account also. As you can see, these are our success stories. These are the students who are placed by AlmaBetter. I have shown you student dashboard. So if you want 15% off on our course, you can just use beta 15 for getting 15% off on our course. Just I'm going to copy this coupon code on beta 15. So please share the Telegram accounts of AlmaBetter. Now you can just go to Telegram and search for the better jobs, AlmaBetter discussion. If you just type AlmaBetter now, you will get all these accounts. AlmaBetter. So you can just click on these channels and you can join. So all your doubts can be cleared there. Okay. Use this coupon code beta 15 for 15% off. Guys, if you have any queries, you can ask them in the comment section or in Q&A. As of now, we are not giving any prizes for this participation. All of you will get certificates after this masterclass. By Monday, you all get certificates for attending this masterclass. Thank you guys. If you have any queries, reach out to us through Telegram, or you can also contact us on, I'll show you where you can contact. Just go to almabetter.com and you can contact this one, admissions@almabetter.com. Reach out to us or call us at this number. We'll solve all your queries regarding anything you can ask. Or you can follow us on social media platforms, or you can ask us queries there also. All your queries will get resolved. I hope all of you liked this masterclass event. Thank you guys. Thanks for attending this masterclass. Meet you next week. Bye bye.